Mike. Thanks for coming back. This is the first time in a long time that we've done one of these programs, things they usually don't teach you, okay? So we thought we'd do something a little different. We've been taking our tour through Italy and heading into Barcelona and everything in the next few weeks. But one of the neighbors told me one time that he watched the program and never realized what a group of crows were. So then I figured I would put another program together. So today's program, we're going to start off with weird facts about King Tut. Now, we know King Tut by that name, but on the other hand, as you'll see by the screen here, the first paragraph, he was known by a whole bunch of other different things. And he was so young, but he in fact acquired all these names during that period of time. The interesting thing here is his father and mother were related, okay? His mitochondrial DNA, which is inherited only from the mother, determined that his mother and father were brother and sister. This, in fact, causes some issues, and one of the problems that King Tut had was he was physically disabled with a disability and deformity of his left foot. The bone necrosis that required use of a cane. Once again, remember, he was under 10 years old whenever he became king. He had, of course, they're finding out now that he was a leader of the army, even though he had these issues, and they found in his crypt, they found 5,000 articles included in that were archery equipment, bows, armor, and things like that. So he was an interesting young man for sure. The second person we're going to take a peek at is Davy Crockett. During Davy Crockett's life, he only had 4 years of formal education, as you see there, and that was at the age of 13. Crockett's father sent him to school, and he got into a fight with one of the other boys, and he never returned to school. He sacrificed his life for the American people and died in the Alamo, but unlike what the original 1960 movie of the Alamo demonstrated, where he died fighting the battle, apparently, according to one of the generals there, or the colonel, Enrique de la Pena, say that he was one of 6 people that were killed after the battle. And the newer movie of the Battle of the Alamo, in fact, did have more or less this kind of a thing going on in it. Crockett spent about 18 years of his life in public service, and when I'm talking about public service, as the House of Representatives, in the State House, and things like that. He also was a local representative for his local community. One of the things that most people don't know about him is he opposed Andrew Jackson's 1830 Indian Removal Act. He was the only person from his area of his state that actually decided to, in fact, go against that because he didn't feel it was good that the Indians were being moved all over the country or all over the land at that point. Now, the interesting thing, of course, this comes off the Supreme Court ruling recently that Oklahoma, half of Oklahoma is owned by the Creek tribe now. That's a Supreme Court ruling that just came out this week, which is going to be interesting because there's 7 or 8 other states that have large Indian reservations on them that, in fact, can now claim other parts of the states. The next thing we're going to look at is the facts about the British royal family. Okay, the royal family, the succession, and you see there the first paragraph, a daughter of a German homeopathic doctor would now be sitting on the throne. In 2011, it was discovered that a 25-year-old German woman who works on an online furniture company is a direct descendant of Queen Victoria and could have been Queen of England if it wasn't for a technicality that has now been fixed. So she in fact could have been the next person in line, beating out Prince of Wales Charles. The interesting thing is that whenever they realized this, the royal family, who in fact did change their name to the House of Windsor because the German name that they had before they changed that, in fact, didn't go well in the British hierarchy. But anyhow, you see there, Prince of Wales, that's Charles, Duke of Cambridge, that's William, and then his children, and the Duke of Sussex, which we know is in fact Harry, and the rest of the people down there, down to Princess Eugenia. One thing most people don't know about Queen Elizabeth II is she's officially the queen of 16 other nations. This is all part of the Commonwealth, and it involves much of the Caribbean, Grenada, Jamaica, Belize, Barbados, but it also includes Australia, and well, Canada is part of the Commonwealth as well. Okay, so this is, like I said, this is things that most people don't know or have never been talked to about. The interesting thing, this is the only post office in the United States that does not fly the American flag, and that's the Be Free Franklin Post Office in Philadelphia. The reason for that is they didn't have a flag whenever he started the post office. The post office sits in a house once owned by Franklin, and there is a museum upstairs that features postal memorabilia. The founding fathers signed the envelopes Be Free Franklin as a protest against the British rule. There are more card deck combinations than there are atoms on Earth. And if, like I said, I'm a terrible card player, so I totally agree with this. The bad hand that you may have received is totally mathematical. All right. The deck of 52 cards has an astronomically large number of permutations, and it's a 69-digit number to total out the entire possibility that you have. I mean, it's easier to hit the lottery in a couple days in a row than it is to get the permutations from the deck of cards. More than half of Shakespeare's characters die in the same way. Shakespeare had a flair for the dramatic, but he also relied on some tried and true tips. Okay, when The Guardian broke down from the open source Shakespeare in 2016, they found that majority of the fatalities, 54 out of the 100 deaths in all of his plays, were due to stabbings. The second most common death was being poisoned, but just 4 characters met their maker that way. Now, for some of us, there were 16 comedies by Shakespeare, including The Gentleman of Verona, Much to Do About Nothing, and The Taming of the Shrew. There were 11 historical, dealing mostly with the kings. Henry IV, parts 1 and 3, Richard III, and King John. There were 12 tragedies, and the best known, of course, is Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth, and Hamlet. There are polka-dotted zebras, okay? And this little guy that you see on the picture is in fact an example of that. Zebras are all known for their striking black and white stripes, but it turns out that not all of them are born with that lovely line pattern. The polka-dotted baby zebra that's seen below, that was spotted in Kenya reserve in 2019, named Tara, and the foal has a coat that is primarily dark but has white dots. The coloring thought to be a genetic mutation, and from the most recent information about Tara was the fact that she was living fine and enjoying the grass in that location. There was only one continent without grassland. Okay, and Antarctica is an amazing place that boasts incredibly frosty landscape, unbelievably low temperatures, and volcanic activity. According to the National Geographic, it is the windiest, driest, and iciest place on Earth. Okay, one of the interesting things about it is it's 14 million kilometers in size. Okay, and its population goes from 1,000 to 5,000 people depending upon the season. Now, when you put that in perspective, the population of Peters Township is about 23,000. So we have many times more than the population of Antarctica. One of the things that is interesting is the fact that human corpse can continue to move for more than 1 year after death. The thought of the body moving as a person after the person dies sounds like something out of a horror movie, but it may be a natural phenomenon. According to the 2019 study published in the Forensic Science International and led by Australian researchers, corpses can continue to move for more than a year after death. What they found was that the arms were significantly moving, so that the arms that started off down by the body ended up to the side of the body. As one of the persons told ABC News, one arm went out and then came back and nearly touched the side of the body again. The movement is believed to be a result of the decomposition process and causes the corpse ligaments to dry out and contract, pulling the limbs as they do. Eggshells are now being used to grow new human bones. Chicken eggshells are mostly made up of calcium carbonate, a substance that also exists in human bones, and that's why the researchers at the University of Massachusetts believe that eggs are ideal for growing new bones for humans who have suffered injuries to their skeleton. There is a great need for development new and functional materials to repair and regenerate damaged bones. A professor of chemical engineering who led the information, we like to take unconventional approaches. We look at nature and try to see what already exists. One of the interesting things about this study that goes on is the fact that they looked at water-soluble chicken eggshell membrane for improvement of joint health in adults with knee osteoarthritis. Okay, so it's, like I said, these things that are common laying around the house and probably thrown out after breakfast can be saving people's livelihoods and saving their life. The furry tufts of hair inside a cat's ear are called ear furnishings. Okay, once again, it's like looking at your tie shoes and realizing that those things at the tips of your shoelaces or where the holes are where you bring the shoelace, everything has a name, and most of us don't understand that or don't realize it. It's called ear furnishings, and once again, the little picture of the cat there demonstrates that very well. Unlike most snakes, anacondas give birth to live babies as opposed to eggs. Anacondas aren't like typical snakes for plenty of reasons, including the fact that they can grow up to 30 feet in length and can weigh up to 550 pounds. Another noteworthy difference, unlike most other snakes, anacondas don't lay eggs, but instead deliver live babies. They can birth up to 40 snakes at a time. Of the 3,400 different species of snakes found throughout the world, only 116 are found here in the United States, 19 of which are venomous. Snakes are cold-blooded vertebrae that are found virtually in every environment and types and climates. Unlike humans, their sense of smell is contained in their tongue. It is a common misconception that snakes multiply by laying eggs. About 30% of the snakes do give live births. Nettle pudding. Now, this is something that we probably haven't heard of too much here, but it is something that was something that is made in still to this day in England. As you see there, the University of Wales tested an ancient recipe for nettle pudding, which dates back around 8,000 years. Although the nettle plants are something that your parents warn you to stay away from because they in fact cause irritation to the skin if you touch it. Once they're cooked, then it seems to be okay. It's, as it says, it's the oldest recipe that they have been able to find, 8,000 years old. And the ingredients of this nettle pudding are sorrel, watercress, dandelions, nettles, and sort of the thing you'll find in a ditch in the United Kingdom. Not only can crows recognize individual human faces and hold grudges, which they found out at the University of Washington, according to a 2008 study, tons of anecdotal evidence from wildlife biologists and highly intelligent birds are capable of remembering individual human faces, even if those who have wronged them wear a disguise. So how do crows show their distaste? They scream. The birds are really raucous, screaming persistently, one volunteer in the crow study told the New York Times, and it was clear that they weren't upset about something in general. They were upset with me. It sounds intense. Once again, a group of crows is known as a murder. Chicago is sinking. You may have heard that Venice, Italy, is sinking, but so is Chicago, and it's going down just as quickly according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. The Illinois city getting 1 or 2 millimeters lower every year, that's 4 to 8 inches every century. For comparison, Venice is sinking at a rate of 2 millimeters per year. The phenomenon is due to a glacial melt that happened around 10,000 years ago. It led to some areas rising after the weight of the ice was gone. Consider what would happen if you squeezed the end of a tube of toothpaste. The other end would pop up. Now the ground is settling again, which means it's shrinking back. The line that passes through the north third of the Lake Michigan and Lake Erie, meaning the northern lake beds are slowly rising and therefore getting shallower, while the southern parts are shrinking, giving the lake a tilt that makes the water rise. Because of this, Milwaukee is expected to see a lake level rise 5.5 inches over the next century, and Cleveland could experience a 4.4 inch increase along its lakefront. When we, like I said, we keep moving from different places here, and now we're going to move over to Africa, which is the only land mass that is in all 4 hemispheres. As you already know, planet Earth is divided into 4 hemispheres, north, south, east, and west, but only one of the 7 continents can lay claim to being located in all 4, and that's Africa. Now, once again, when we're sharing the information like this, we like to go ahead and go one step further. Istanbul, previously known as Constantinople and Byzantine, is a transcontinental city in Eurasia, Europe, and Asia, which dates back to 660 BCE. Although it is not the capital, Istanbul is the cultural and economic historic center of Turkey. It sits on both continents, so you have a city that is actually sitting on Asia and Europe at the same time. Its legacy as a former of 3 empires, Roman, Byzantine, and Ottoman. In addition to the city's historical heritage, it also offers modern facilities and continues to project future developments. J is the only letter that does not appear on the periodic table. If you run through the elements, you'll hydrogen, helium, oxygen, etc. There was only one letter missing, and that's J, and that is unless you're looking at the periodic table from countries like Norway, Poland, Sweden, and Serbia, which do use J for iodine. I'm sure that when you've taken pictures, you've seen the red eye in the fact if you take a picture, especially at a person who, in fact, is in a darker area. Okay, when the flash of the camera goes off, the eye isn't prepared for a sudden influx of light. The pupil doesn't have time to restrict. You're likely using a flash in a dark lighting, so your eyes have dilated to adjust to the dark room. When the flash goes off and the photo is taken, your eyes are still dilated, so the light reflects off the red blood cells or vessels in the choroid, which is the layer of connective tissue in the back of the eye that nourishes the retina. Princess Leia's hair in Star Wars was inspired by the real Mexican rebels. Star Wars may have taken place a long time ago in a galaxy far away, but the movie makers responsible for coming up with Princess Leia's iconic hairstyle for the film were inspired by some very real-life warriors, in particular the Soldados, or the female Mexican rebels who fought against the dictatorship of Diaz around the beginning of the 20th century. It's believed that director George Lucas based Leia's double bun on a picture of Clara de la Rocha, who was a colonel in the Mexican Revolution. An archaeologist discovered a 5,000-year-old brewery in China. Kicking back with a pint isn't as modern as you might think. In 2016, archaeologists in the central plain of China discovered beer-making toolkits in underground rooms that were built between 3400 and 2900 BC. The equipment included funnels, pots, jugs, and pottery stoves. Scientists used the residue they found in the tools and deduced that the 5,000-year-old beer recipe, which they published in the Procedures of the National Academy of Sciences. Astronauts can grow up to 2 inches in space. While astronauts are floating around in space, they aren't subjected to the pressure of Earth's gravity. As a result, the vertebrae in their spines can expand and relax, which means their bodies stretch up to 3% taller. That means that someone who is 6 feet tall could grow up 2 inches while they're in space. However, the additional height is only temporary, and when the astronauts return to Earth, they shrink back down to their normal size within a few months. The FBI once investigated a song for 2 years. As far as the national security goes, songs are typically fairly harmless, but back in the 60s, parents across the country became upset by a rumor that claimed that the song Louie Louie by the Kingsmen contained inappropriate subliminal messages. The FBI stepped in and spent more than 2 years putting the tune through various audio tests, and despite producing a 120-page report, the feds merely concluded that the song is unintelligible at any speed. You have to wonder sometimes who's getting paid to do what. Jellyfish. Jellyfish in 2019, underwater cinematographer Dan Abbott and wildlife biologist presenter Lizzie Daly were diving in the UK's Celtic Sea when they came across something incredible, a giant barrel jellyfish that was as big as a human themselves. Abbott was able to capture the video of the creature. These jellyfish are not even as big as a lion's mane. Jellyfish Sirena capitella, or whatever that is, which can float around the ocean at a full length of 120 feet long. Fish skins can be used to heal burns. In Brazil, doctors lacking the supplies medical professionals in the United States might use are using tilapia skin to bandage and treat second and third degree burns. The fish skin reportedly cuts down on healing time, reduces the need for pain medication, and helps with scarring. Due to the abundant amount of collagen proteins, the 2018 scientists from Nanyang Technical University in Singapore also discovered in general fish scale derived collagen can help heal wounds. What they also found, and it was interesting too, was applying fish skins can help get the inflammation out that Roger mentioned. keeping those from suffering diabetic foot ulcers that can be used to help that infirmity. Fish skins have made headlines in the last year as a novel treatment whenever animals have received terrible burns during the California wildfires. After November's campfire in Butte County, veterinarians from the University of California, Davis crafted little tilapia skin mittens and other dressings to help pets, dogs, cats, heal. Okay, and now, like I said, you got the understanding here that there are so many uses for these things which have been overlooked for years. 4 seconds is the perfect length of time to dunk your Oreo in milk. You have to wonder why people get paid to look at this stuff. If you like to enjoy the classic combination of milk and cookies, but hate when your cookie gets too soggy, you're not alone. That's what the University of Utah State found in 2017. They conducted tests to determine the ideal length of time you should let your cookie soak in milk. Their findings, 4 seconds. That time frame is backed up by a professor of physics at the University of Bristol who came up with a complicated equation in 1990 that determined that the ideal length of time for dunking a British biscuit was 3.5 to 5 seconds. Charles Darwin frequently ate the animals he studied. Speaking of eating odd animals, the father of evolution, Charles Darwin, always had a taste for unusual cuisine. He was even a member of the Glutton Club while a student at Cambridge University. And according to IO9, he ate the iguanas he studied at the Galapagos. He ate armadillo, which he claimed tasted like duck. He ate puma and the lesser rhea, known to scientists as Rhea darwinii. He got his name because Darwin sent a few bits of it he hadn't eaten to London. According to Food Beast, the scientist had been enjoying the large flightless rhea bird for Christmas dinner. We all know Pablo Picasso of his artwork, and you see a couple pieces there. But the bottom line is, his real name is actually much larger than Pablo Picasso, and I'm not even going to try to repeat it because I know I'll mess it up. The painter's full name, as you see there, starts at Pablo Diego Jose Francisco de Paula Juan, and I let you go from there. Okay, but there's 23 different words in that name. Now, how he got it, I have no clue. Only one U.S. president has ever seen the inside of the vault at Fort Knox. Fort Knox is one of the most secure places in the United States, which is why it shouldn't shock anyone that visitors aren't welcome at the guarded facility. However, it may surprise you to learn that even our country's leaders aren't given permission to visit. In fact, only one president, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, has ever been inside the vault, and that was back in 1943. The interesting thing about Fort Knox, according to the Bureau of Fiscal Reserve, there are 147,341,858,382 ounces of gold, and as of March 2020, the value of that gold was $250 billion. But the change from that time to this time and the current value is now $265 billion. Okay, so that's just in a few short months, that has been the change in the value of the gold, which is about 50% of the gold revenue that's owned by the federal government here in the United States. The first use of OMG was in a letter to Winston Churchill in 1917. If you text OMG To your friend, you might think that you're using a modern acronym. But it turns out that the first appearance of the three-letter expression was in a letter to Winston Churchill in 1917. Lord Fisher, an admiral and naval innovator, wrote to the Prime Minister and was obviously excited about a possible honor for himself and those in his line of work. He wrote, "I hear a new order of knights in on the tapis. OMG, shower it on the Admiralty." So once again, what you think is new isn't always new. Sesame Street Snuffleupagus character has a first name. Okay, everybody has grown up with Mr. Snuffleupagus. Oh my God. Or Mr. Snuffleupagus, if you fancy. It is a beloved character on the long-running children's television show Sesame Street, and while millions of kids adore the big and big-hearted creature, they may not have known that his first name is Aloysius. Phobophobia is the fear of phobias. There are plenty of things to be afraid of, including heights, small places, and of course spiders. But there are people who actually have phobia about phobias themselves, which is called phobophobia. Now, the interesting study of specific phobias is a complicated process. Most people don't seek treatment for any of these conditions, so cases go very unreported. These phobias are also based on cultural experiences, gender, and age. In a 1998 survey of more than 8,000 respondents published in the British Journal of Psychiatry, trusted sources found that some of the most common phobias were cocophobia, the fear of ugliness; coulrophobia, the fear of clowns; and gamophobia, the fear of marriage. YouTube was founded on Valentine's Day and started out as a dating app. Today, YouTube is on the place to go for makeup tutorials, toy reviews, and music videos. But when the site was founded on Valentine's Day in 2005, it was meant to be a dating app where singles could upload video profiles. Years later, YouTube co-founder Steve Chen explained, "We always thought there was something with video there, but what would be the actual practical application? We thought dating would be the obvious choice." There's a person buried on the moon. There's only one human who has made the moon their final resting place. Eugene Shoemaker was considered one of the founders of the planetary science, and after a career filled with stellar accomplishments, he spent his days traveling around the world to study impact craters. When he passed away in 1997 during one of his trips, his wife Caroline, who had once discovered a comet with her husband, sent his ashes to the moon in a metal cylinder that was inscribed with a quote from Romeo and Juliet. "And when he shall die, take him and cut him out in little stars, and he will make the face of heaven so fine that all the world will be in love with the night and pay no worship to the garish sun." Gene is considered the founding father as astrology, and NASA rewarded his work by sending his ashes to the moon. The polycarbonate urn capsule was built by Celestis, the same company that sent the ashes of Star Trek creator Gene Roddenberry into orbit. Wrapped around Shoemaker's capsule was a brass foil ribbon bearing a picture of the Beringer crater and a star-themed quote from Romeo and Juliet, which I've just mentioned. With a precious cargo in tow, the spacecraft launched out of Cape Canaveral, Florida on January 6, 1998. More than a year later, the vessel, whose objective had been to hunt for water, was deliberately crashed on the lunar South Pole. and shoemaker's ashes went down with it. The composer Oscar Hammerstein is the first and only person named Oscar to win an Oscar. In 1941, the lyricist Oscar Hammerstein, too, won his first Academy Award for Best Original Song thanks to the lyrics he wrote for The Last Time I Saw Paris from the film Lady Be Good. The win also made him the first person to take home an Oscar who shared the name with the award's statue. According to the Portable Press, he's still the only Oscar to ever win an Oscar, and he won the second for the Best Original Song in 1945, so this one, Oscar, has 2 Oscars to his name. Hammerstein contributed the lyrics to 850 songs. According to the complete lyrics of Oscar Hammerstein, edited by Amy Ash, some well-known songs are Old Man River, Can't Help Loving That Man, Make Believe, but the newer songs that most people understand and remember, from Oklahoma, Some Enchanted Evening, South Pacific, Getting to Know You, and Climb Every Mountain from The Sound of Music. There are no words rhyming with month, bulb, wolf, walrus, rhythm, husband, or woman. Unless you get a little creative with pronunciation, you won't find any rhyming words in the English language for these words I've just mentioned. That is, unless you choose to consider the old-fashioned words that are no longer in use, such as kolb, the little-known 17th century word for a snippy reply, and smithum, which refers to fine malt dust or powdered lead ore. The University of Cairn is the world's oldest educational institute. Located in Fez, Morocco, the University of Cairn, or University of, and I'm not going to try to say that because I don't want to offend anybody, was founded all the way back in 859 AD. It has continued to operate for more than 1,000 years, which earned it the Guinness World Record for the oldest higher learning institute. Oldest university in 1963, it was incorporated into Morocco's modern state university system. Nearly 8,000 students enroll each year. I found this to be interesting that the university was started by a Muslim woman, Fatima el-Fahari. She was wealthy and endowed with funds from her father, and she used that to, in fact, build this university. It took about 15 years to build, and in fact, she was so, her piety was such that she tried to fast during most of the time of construction of this facility. Okay, and it's like I said, it's the interesting thing about this is that most people would be surprised, I believe, that this university was started by this woman. IKEA is an acronym which stands for, and you can see that itself because I can't pronounce it. In 1943, Ingvar, who was a 17-year-old at the time, was given money from his father as a reward for doing well in his schoolwork. With his earnings, the teen decided to start his own business. To name it, he used his own first 2 initials, I and K, as well as the first initials of the name of the farm and village where he grew up, E and A. Put them all together and you have IKEA. There are multiple versions of the Mona Lisa. When we think of it, we think about the one that's hanging in the Louvre, which is in the frame in the picture that you see there. The Mona Lisa may be the most famous painting in the world, but she is not actually an original. There are multiple copies of the Mona Lisa all through the paint, and although thought to be painted by Leonardo da Vinci, though some may have been made by his students who were attempting to copy the master's work. You see the one that's in the Prado in Madrid, Spain, is up in the upper right, and you see the background is totally different, and it is a younger Mona Lisa. Along with the Mona Lisa in the Louvre, there are other Isleworth Mona Lisa, the Prado Museum, the Hermitage in Russia has a Mona Lisa, and there's even a naked version of Mona Lisa. One type of turtle can survive months under the ice, breathing through his behind. Not all creatures heads to warmer climates when the weather gets colder, and that means they need to adapt to the changing conditions. And while bears get cozy in caves and bees nuzzle up in their nest, painted turtles deal with their ponds freezing over in a more surprising way. As the ice restricts their access to the air above, instead breathing through their behinds, specifically through the cochlear orifice, through the process called cochlear respiration. This way, the turtles are able to get oxygen directly from the water that's around them. The first movie ever to be released on a soundtrack was Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. There are plenty of classical film soundtracks that movie lovers and music lovers alike enjoy listening to over and over again, but the very first film to ever commercially release a soundtrack was Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. The movie came out in 1937, while the soundtrack, called Songs from Walt Disney's Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, with the same characters and sound effects as the film of the title, was released in January 1938 and included tracks like I'm Wishing, Whistle While You Work, Hi Ho, and Someday My Prince Will Come. The Library of Congress is the largest library in the world, with more than 162 million items in no fewer than 450 languages. The Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. is the largest library in the world based on both its shelf space and the number of books that is on them. The dimple in your wine bottle serves a purpose. Also referred to as a kick-up or a punt, the dimple in the bottom of the wine bottle is a remnant of the past, when bottles were made of hand-blown glass. If the glass blower didn't push the seam of the wine bottle up, it would not stand up straight, because there would be a lump. Today, the deeper punt can mean it's nicer, tastier bottle of wine. So run your hand underneath the bottle of vino before purchasing. Polar bears can run faster than professional football players. Polar bears can run up to 25 miles per hour. By comparison, the fastest NFL player, Nick Chubb, can run just over 22 miles per hour. Yes, in fact, he plays for the Browns. Archaeologists have tracked Lewis and Clark by their bodily waste. Throughout the early 19th century, explorers Meriwether Lewis and William Clark trekked across the United States from East Coast to the Pacific Ocean, and while they diligent journals, modern historians and archaeologists have had years of struggling to piece together the precise locations their expedition encompassed, information that would help future generations understand this historically crucial journey, then researchers came up with an idea for tracking their extreme movements, analyzing toilet mercury. This is an interesting thing because of the fact that Lewis and Clark expedition started out here from Pittsburgh, and started out in 1806. It was known as the Corps of Discovery Expedition. The federal government had recognized Pittsburgh as the starting point of Lewis and Clark expedition. The trip covered about 8,000 miles from Pittsburgh to Oregon and took 3 years, from 1803 to 1806. President Thomas Jefferson, who commissioned that expedition, took them, in fact, and hired them to do this. Now, some interesting follow-up. As it happened, mercury-laced laxatives that were popular, a solution for treating constipation during that Lewis and Clark era, and traces of mercury can be traced centuries after. And that's what was done. So by testing old latrines sites along the route for mercury, researchers could determine which ones the famous adventurers visited. Altogether, some 600 sites have been connected back to the famed pair. Dry cleaning isn't technically dry. Your dry cleaning garments are thrown into a giant front-loaded washer with a large detergent. Yes, your clothes are completely immersed in liquid solvent. It is only called dry because there is no water in it. The dry cleaning was originally discovered by Jean-Baptiste Joly in 1855 when his maid accidentally spilled petroleum from a kerosene lamp all over his tablecloth, only to find that it removed stains he couldn't previously get out. Because petroleum is harmful to the environment, with the amount of dry cleaning the world does, new solvents have been created over time. Sounds travel 4 times faster in water than in air. Water is about 800 times denser than air, so there are more particles for waves to bounce off. Thus, the sound is faster in water. However, the density of the opposite effect on physical bodies, such as, say, a bullet, physical matter encounters drag when in water due to its density. As laid out by the drag equation, is proven that jumping into the water and swimming beneath the surface will literally save you from catching a bullet, as you've seen in many of the movies. All right, so it's based on some scientific information. As far as the government is concerned, video games are art. If your parents weren't overly keen about the amount of time you're spending playing video games, and maybe still do, you can justify your pastime with the fact that in 2011 the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that video games are a form of art. In response to the issue of the sale of violent video games in California, the High Court ruled that video games deserve the same First Amendment protection as books, comics, plays, and other artistic medium. Fireflies. As Mark Burnham, an entomology professor at the University of Florida, explained to Scientific America, a firefly's light itself is a result of so-called cold light. Oxygen combines with calcium and triophosphate and the chemical luciferin, and light is produced with minimal energy being lost to heat. Fireflies mainly emit light to attract mates or to defend themselves, and that's why when you put them in a jar, they light up as a defense mechanism. North Korea and China are the only 2 places you can't buy Coca-Cola. No matter where you go, it's comforting to know that you can always get Coca-Cola, well, almost everywhere. While this fizzy drink is sold practically everywhere, it still hasn't officially made its way to North Korea or Cuba. But according to the BBC, that's because these countries are under long-term U.S. trade embargo. But one of the interesting things about Cuba is that you can get Coca-Cola if it in fact is made in Mexico and transferred over there. The hottest chili pepper in the world is so hot it could kill you. The weapon-grade dragon breath chili pepper is so hot it's downright deadly. If you ate one, it could potentially cause a type of anaphylactic I'll get messed up on these. Anaphylactic shock, burning the airways and closing them up. I've tried it on the tip of my tongue, and it just burned and burned, said Mike Smith, the hobby grower who invented the dragon's breath, along with scientists from Nottingham University. So why make it such impractical pepper? As it turns out, the chili was initially developed to be used as a medical treatment for anesthetic that can numb the skin. One of the interesting things about this is that the dragon's breath chili pepper isn't considered the hottest pepper in the world. The hottest pepper is actually given to Pepper X. The Guinness Book of Records has accredited the results of that chili pepper and known as the Carolina Reaper, and it is tested at 2.48 million Scoville units. And I'm, like I said, whenever I read that, I looked up what a Scoville unit as comparison to a jalapeno pepper, which rates about 0.5 of a Scoville unit, not 2.48. So you have to have an understanding on how hot these really are. The last slide we have is Canary Islands are named after dogs, not birds. It might seem safe to assume that Canary Islands were named after canary birds, but the location was actually named after dogs. Although it's off the coast of northwestern Africa, the archipelago is actually part of Spain. In Spain, the area's name of Islas Canarias, which comes from the Latin phrase Canara Insula for island of dogs. World facts related to dogs, now those we can get behind. Well, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. Once again, I hope you learned something. I hope you learned something interesting at least. And I look forward to seeing you on the next Things They Usually Don't Teach You. Thanks for coming.